turns out.
Me too. Okay, let's talk about Trixie Zinnias. How was that painting a turning point in your relationship with Clementine?
A painting that I call Trixie Zinnias was a turning point in my relationship with Clementine Hunter. I bought my first painting from her in 1963. I only intended buying one. It was not long before I was down at Clementine's house buying a second one and then a third one. Each time that I went, I expected her to recognize me as a person who had been there before. And each time that I went, she did not recognize me. And this went on for 2 years. It gave me some insights into her personality because it gave me an opportunity to observe that she really did not suffer fools gladly. She had a sign on her front porch that said 25 cents to look. And she just really was not interested in a lot of people in and out of her house. She was a private person. She also was a very dignified, haughty person. And there were times when I felt as though she really wished that I had not come to buy a picture at all. But at any rate, this failure to recognize me went on for about 2 years. During that time, I had a little miniature German Schnauzer dog. And I used to take the dog down with me to visit her, and she always was interested in the dog. Clementine loved animals, and she loved children. She always had chickens in the yard, and pigs in the yard, and ducks in the yard, and cats, and so forth. So I bred this little very fine miniature German Schnauzer dog to a champion Schnauzer, trying to raise some, to breed some very good dogs to show. Well, I didn't get any show dogs. And I had 9 of those little puppies, and I really was weary of feeding them and tending to them. So when I had only one left, I called her one day and I said, "Clementine, I'm the lady who comes to your house with the little dog in the car that you like. And I just wonder if you would like to have one of her puppies." She's had puppies now. Well, she said yes, she would. So I took her a little male puppy, a very fine, highly bred puppy, and she promptly named him Trixie and loved him and was just very pleased with him. Well, in about 2 weeks, my phone rang. I picked up the phone, and it was Clementine. Now, she never knew my name. She certainly had no way of knowing what my telephone number was. But somewhere in there, she had obtained my telephone number, which leads me to believe to this day that she always knew who I was the entire 2-year period of time, but just didn't choose to be bothered by me. I was just another one of those little white ladies who drove up in front of her house wanting to buy her pictures when she didn't feel like even selling them. But at any rate, I took the little dog to her, and when she called me in a couple of weeks, she said, "You need to come down to my house because Trixie has painted you a picture." And so when I went down, she had this very large, wonderful zinnia, which I now call Trixie Zinnias.
What happened with your relationship after that painting?
Well, that definitely, that point in time was a definite change in our relationship, because then she knew who I was. She always called me Dr. Bailey, though I know she never realized or never understood. She questioned me at times about what kind of doctor I was, and of course, unless you were a medical doctor, she had no real concept of the other. So being Clementine, she just let that drop. I mean, she just pushed it aside. It was not important at all. But the relationship at that point then became one that grew as time passed. And of course, over the years, because that was, let's see, Trixie Zinnias was painted probably in 1965. And until her death, the relationship just gradually gradually was closer and closer, and I came to love her very much. She was very special to me.
How would you describe Clementine as a woman and as an artist?
I don't think I understand the question.
Well, what kind of a woman? If you wanted someone to know who Clementine was, how would you describe her? What kind of a person was she? I mean, her personality traits.
As a person, I would describe Clementine Hunter as a very intelligent, witty, warm person when she chose to be, and with whom she chose to be warm. She had a wonderful sense of humor, and this can be seen in some of her paintings. This regal manner that she evidenced from time to time was, in my opinion, a very noteworthy thing. I have often said that I think that Clementine could have been a wonderful African queen. In ancient, faraway Africa, I think she would have ruled wonderfully and wisely, because she was just that kind of person. She just was not there at the right time.
And what about her as an artist? Her creative genius. Not only an artist who painted, but her other artistic abilities as well.
Clementine Hunter's creative talents and abilities occurred at a time and a place where they really should not have occurred. She should have lived and died in obscurity, as did all of the other people of her race and place and time. But because she had a talent which she said was God-given, and I believe that, and because she was where she was, with creative people around her who encouraged her and stimulated her and provided materials to her, then her talents were allowed to emerge and to continue to emerge. When Clementine first began to paint, she was working at the big house at Melrose Plantation. She was doing all the cooking. She was tending to the children. She was waiting on tables. She was preparing and serving meals to all of those writers and other artists who were at Melrose. And then at the end of the day, she would walk frequently with all of the soiled clothes and take them down to her little cabin, which was probably 1.5 miles to 2 miles away. The cabin had no electricity, it had no plumbing, it was just pretty much a shack. And there she had a sick husband who she was also tending to. Her children were gone at that point. And at the end of the day of hard labor at the big house, and then walking home, and then taking care of her sick husband, then she would paint by kerosene lamp at night. And this was in the early days when she first started painting. I think that Clementine was driven to paint. I think there was a compulsion, and I think she really had no control over it. Once she picked up a paintbrush and had a surface on which to paint, then she painted until she died. And I also have a theory that she might be alive today if she had been able to continue her painting, if the arthritis in her hands and her vision had not failed her. That's probably more than you wanted, but you can snip out of that.
No, this is fabulous. Well, you just answered about 3 questions. with that one answer. That's what I mean. You just keep
I saw
on
you
going.
ticking off there.
Well, it's interesting because one of my questions was, how would you describe Clementine's drive to paint? But what I want you to develop a little bit more is from whence came her talent and inspiration. And of course, she gave credit to God for that. Talk a little bit more about that. I mean, her talent and her inspiration, where she got the ideas for her paintings.
But let's don't start this yet. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Did we son, let me think, what was his name? Frenchie, when Frenchie came home to die.
Was it Frankie?
Frenchie.
Frenchie.
He was her first child by her mom.
Inspiration come. Who did she give credit for the talent?
You don't want the story of how she first picked up the paint.
Oh no! Yes,
you want
do.
that?
Yes.
All right.
Start there.
All right. I'll have to use Francois Mignon's name. Is that all right? Can I just
yes,
throw it in without?
Oh yeah, you'll be talking about him later.
Okay. All right. Give me a start. Francois Mignon stated and wrote about the way in which Clementine Hunter first started painting. Clementine was a house servant at Melrose Plantation when there were well-known artists and writers and photographers, a lot of creative people who were there. One of those persons who came regularly each year to paint the magnolias at Melrose Plantation was Alberta Kinsey, who was a New Orleans artist. And on one of her trips to Melrose, Miss Alberta left behind some paints and brushes. And according to Francois Mignon, Clementine picked those up one day and took them to him and said, "Do you think I could paint a picture?" And he said, "Yes, Clementine, I think you could do anything that you made up your mind to do." And there was an old linen window shade on a table, and he picked that up and gave it to her and said, "Why don't you paint a picture on this linen shade," which had a surface on it, kind of much like a canvas surface might have been. The next morning she knocked on his door very early and she said, "Mr. Francois, I have brought you a picture." And there was the first painting that Clementine painted. It's always interesting to me today, at this point in time, to realize that of all of those people who were there and all of those people on whom she waited and served coffee and cooked and prepared the food, that she has probably come to be best known of the group, which is, it's a really interesting twist of fate. But at any rate, once Clementine picked up that brush and painted that picture, from then on she never failed to paint. She said that the way that she painted, and certainly those of us who have been collecting her work know that this is true, is that she would take whatever she was painting on, whether it was a piece of brown wrapping paper or a piece of corrugated cardboard, or whether it was a shoebox top, or any of those surfaces on which she would paint, that she would first paint the background, and then she would take a pencil and she would do what she called marking, and she would mark the picture. And then later she would take her oil paints, and she only used oil paints, by the way, and then would apply the oil paints. She said that God put those pictures in her mind, and that she felt like because God had put those pictures in her mind, that it was absolutely necessary for her to put them on canvas or canvas board or whatever she had at hand. A good example of where inspiration came from is a painting that I have that's called Frenchie Goes to Heaven. I went to see her one day and she said, "Frenchie's coming home to die." and I didn't even know who Frenchie was, and she told me that he was her oldest son. He'd always lived in California. So the next time I went down to see her, Frenchie was there, and he really had come home to die. And she cared for him and nursed him as though he were a little child, and he did die. And I went to Frenchie's funeral. He was buried down at St. Augustine Church, and in the cemetery where Clementine is now buried. And about 2 weeks later, I was coming home from Baton Rouge one day, and I thought I would pay her a visit. And I did, and we talked a while, and then she said, I have something to show you. And she disappeared into another room and came back with this painting. And it is the cemetery at St. Augustine Church. There is an angel dressed in white emerging, coming from one of those graves. And that's Frenchie. And there also is a little hole up in the sky, and she pointed that out to me and said that was where Frenchie was going to go through to go to heaven. But she said that she had awakened one night in the middle of the night and had this picture in her mind. And so that is how that particular painting was painted.
That's great. We'll have to shoot that.
Okay.
Because that's a wonderful story. Let me see. What, from her, who she gave credit for her talent and her inspiration, what kind of an attitude did she have about life?
Tell me some more.
Well, I guess look at her painting. She accepted, because she had a very hard life, but she seemed to accept it, and her paintings are full of such joy. It's like, I know life is hard, but I choose to be joyful about it.
Okay.
I guess I think about the verse in Nehemiah, the joy of the Lord is my strength. I mean, that, to me, I see that in her work. And from your visiting with her and seeing what she painted, you know, how did she feel about life?
That question bothers me a little bit. Let me think about it. I don't know quite. Okay, let me see if what I can do with that for you. Are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Clementine's early life was a very hard life. I'm old enough to remember some of the way things were before World War II, which gives me a little insight into plantation life prior to that time, and certainly in the first half or more of Clementine Hunter's life. She worked in the fields. She chopped cotton under a hot sun. She picked cotton. Do we want to talk about that right here? Do we want to talk about picking cotton right here?
Well, if
let's pass
yeah,
over. Go ahead. And then when she was, after all of those years of field work, hard grinding work, hours long in each day, she was promoted, and that was considered a promotion, to the big house on the plantation, where then she did hard grinding work in the house with the cooking and the cleaning and the tending to the children and the waiting on the people and doing the wash and those sorts of things. But when you look at her paintings now that depict all of those things, such as the cotton picking, or the wash days, where and the honky tonk on Saturday night, where actually people were killing and shooting and cutting and drinking until they fell down drunk, you know, as some sort of release from all of that. hard work of the week. But all of those things are depicted in her paintings as joyous kinds of occasions. And that's one of the characteristics of her work that people almost always notice, because the colors are bright and happy. And at the funerals, the caskets are always blue and pink, and the sky is colorful, and the people are dressed up in their singing, and of course the weddings are joyous. But even the hard work kinds of things that she painted are depicted as happy. I think that Clementine, in her later years and as she painted, I think those things really became that way in her memory and in her mind. I think she really forgot some of the hard grinding part. And I really have to move right into cotton picking here because it just goes right in. A good example of this characteristic of Clementine's work of being depicting on occasions being joyous when we all know that it was not really a joyous occasion would be the days in which she picked cotton. She always said, after she started painting, she would I've heard her say it many times, and I know that she said it to other people because it's been quoted so often, that she would rather pick cotton than she would paint a picture. And we all know, common sense tells us that just can't possibly be the case, because if anyone has ever picked cotton, they know how hard it is, and I think one can imagine how difficult it is, because cotton bows have burrs in them that prick your fingers, and your fingers bleed, and you're bending over, and you are dragging a sack behind you. Clementine used to talk about her cotton picking days, and she had small children when she was picking cotton, and she said that she would place her children under a tree at the edge of a cotton field, and then she would pick down a row of cotton and then pick back down the next row of cotton back to her children to check on them, to be sure they were all right, to feed them. Babies were put in sort of slings or cradles over the limb of a tree that she would make. But her memories of painting cotton are joyous, and one only has to look at that scene, and she has painted it over and over and over again. Usually the ladies have red hats on, and the cotton sacks that hold the cotton, which actually were a sort of a brownish gray burlap, in her paintings are white, and they're filled with cotton. And the cotton plants are all fluffy and full of cotton, and it's such a happy occasion. And in later years, she looked back on that as that sort of thing. So I don't think that we can say that Clementine's life was happy and joyous by any stretch of the imagination. It was a hard life. But somewhere in her later days, in her paintings, she has depicted it as a happy life. And I hope that you really felt that way about it. It would be nice to think that you really did.
Why do you think she said that it was easier to pick cotton than paint a picture? Was the creative process difficult for her?
I'm not sure I know why Clementine said so often that it was easier to paint a picture. I'm sorry. It was easier to pick cotton than it was to paint a picture. Certainly it was not the money that she made, because she used to say that she could pick 150 to 200 pounds of cotton a day. Now, you only have to pick up a cotton ball to know that that is a lot of cotton, and she was paid 50 cents for 100 pounds of cotton, which meant that if she picked 150 pounds of cotton, she made 75 cents that day. certainly she made more than that off of her paintings, even in the very early days when she was selling. I don't really know why. It's just that she remembered it as a happy occasion. She talked about not being able to pick cotton early in the morning because when the dew was on the cotton, it would stick to your fingers. Apparently, there was some pleasure in that for her, though I don't understand how or why.
Me either. Let's talk a little bit about Francois. Who was Francois, and what role, Francois Mignon, and what role did he play in Clementine's life?
Francois Mignon is the person who I think we have to credit with Clementine Hunter, the artist. Francois came to Melrose Plantation as a visitor and ended up staying there for the balance of his life, which was many, many years. He was a writer. He wrote a weekly column that was published in a number of Louisiana newspapers. He wrote occasional articles that were published in other journals or magazines. He had a vast correspondence. He corresponded with people all over the world. And this enabled him to tell people about Clementine. And as I frequently said, she should have just lived and died, as all of the other people on the plantation did in those days, as an unknown person. But because of his contacts and because he worked very hard at showing the world that there was this person down at Melrose Painting, he really, he almost created her. He enabled her to be an artist. It was Francois who first said, yes, you can paint a picture if you try. It was Francois who gave her the materials with which to paint, and did for many years, because the first paintings that she painted she gave away. Eventually she began to charge 25 and 50 cents for each one, and that did not buy many materials. So he really was the person who actually created Clementine Hunter, the artist. I don't think that she would have been Clementine Hunter, the artist, without him. She might have painted several pictures, but no one would ever have known. And whether she would have continued under those circumstances is doubtful, even though I do think she was really driven to do. I just feel like Clementine, I think that her talents are a gift, as she thought they were a gift. And I just really believe that she was put in that place at that time, that it was not accidental. I think he was there to play his role. The place was there to provide the influence. And I do think that without him, it would have been very difficult for Clementine to have been a well-known folk artist.
How do you feel that her creativity manifested itself before she started painting, or do you? Well, I guess we do.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about are the quilts.
Right.
Okay, so how were Clementine's creative abilities manifest?
Although Francois Mignon wrote that he was the one who enabled her or encouraged her to paint the first painting, there is evidence that Clementine had been doing a little dabbling in paints before that. We're not really sure about that, but there are a lot of other things that she did do. She made dolls and dressed them. The main thing that she was doing before this time was she made these wonderful pictorial quilts. They almost always show Melrose Plantation. They show the buildings on Melrose Plantation. They show the people on Melrose Plantation. And they're done in a wonderful way they are appliqued piece on top of piece. Rather than being sewn together or pieced together, she would start with a piece of fabric and then cut another piece of fabric and applique it on the top of that, and then more on top of that figure, and then more. All of this was held together with whatever she had at hand to hold it together, which in most instances were paper sacks that corn feed came in. The plantation store would sell cracked corn to feed the chickens, and this always came in big bags, heavy paper bags. And if you look on the back of Clementine's quilts, and in my opinion the back is almost more interesting than the front, you will find all of these materials, these strange sorts of heavy papers that she gathered up wherever she could get them and use them. You know, Clementine's life was grindingly poor. There was no money, absolutely no money. You know, if you pick cotton for 50 cents a hundred and you make 75 cents a day, that's not a lot of money, and then you have to eat, and you have children to feed, and you have clothes you have to wear, and all of this comes from the company store, from the plantation store. So if you know, if she chose to do creative things, and certainly she chose to do creative things, she did it with whatever she could beg, borrow, and steal, more or less.
It is.
I wish we had some of the dolls. You know, none of us have any of those dolls. I've seen them. I saw them at the Melrose auction, but I don't know of anybody who has one. It's a shame because we need one.
Yes, we
somewhere
do.
among us.
Moving on now to her honorary doctorate. Why was she given an honorary doctorate, and how did she respond to it?
In 1955, there was a show of Clementine Hunter's work in Natchitoches at Northwestern State University, which was the first display of her work in this area. Because the university was a segregated, a racially segregated university, African Americans were not allowed on the campus. So for her to see her own first show in this area, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Earl Williams, took her on a Sunday afternoon when the university was closed so that she could see her own paintings. This always bothered me. All through the years, this bothered me a great deal. And time passed, and in 1985, I found myself in a position at the university as in a dean's position, so I could get the president's ear if I needed to, and I thought it was time that we correct that wrong. So I talked with him one day and I said, don't you think it might be well for us to give Clementine Hunter, might be good to give Clementine Hunter an honorary Doctor of Fine Arts degree? And he agreed. And this was only the fourth one that this university had ever awarded. And it was a wonderful occasion. Of course, I know that Clementine never really understood what was happening as far as the honorary doctorate was concerned, because she never understood my doctor's degree. And I know that it puzzled her, but being Clementine and handling every situation with great dignity, she didn't let it bother her at all, and she readily agreed to participate in the graduation ceremony. So we had a little reception for her at the art gallery before the graduation, and one of the Baton Rouge radio stations, television stations, brought their satellites uplink here on the back of an 18-wheeler, because we didn't have an uplink in Natchitoches. And they hauled the uplink from Baton Rouge to Natchitoches, parked it outside of the building where the graduation and the party was, and the Live at 5 kind of news, Clementine was interviewed by the newscaster from that station. And it's always pleased me greatly that the first person in Natchitoches who went up to a satellite and came back down again happened to be Clementine Hunter. That's just almost unbelievable to me. But at any rate, she was so regal and held the whole thing as though she did this every day, you know. Then we took her over to the place where the graduation was held. There probably were 2,000 to 3,000 people there that particular night. At the time, Clementine was 98 years old, and of course could not walk down the aisle with the other people. So we had a wheelchair for her, and her good friend Tom Whitehead in his cap and gown, and Clementine in her cap and gown with her gold tassel on her mortarboard. Was wheeled down the aisle and up to the stage. And there, 2 of our honors students, 2 young men, helped her up the steps, and she was able to stand at the edge of the stage by herself. And the president read about her and all of her accomplishments, and then he and I together put her hood over her head and got her all fixed, and then he asked her if she would like to say something. And there were all those faces looking at her, and you know, there she stood, this little person, and she looked out and said, "Thank you." And that was it. And she took her diploma and was helped back down the stairs, and Tom took her back down the aisle, and there were some 2,000 to 3,000 people standing up, applauding. She handled all of this, as I said, as though she had received honorary doctorates every.
Or the camera does it.
Okay.
Okay.
After that graduation, and many people talked with her about it and asked her what she thought about it, and she said, you know, that she thought it was nice. She was not terribly impressed. It was really hard to impress Clementine Hunter. She took everything very much in stride. But she did take her hood and her mortarboard with her gold tassel and her diploma, and these were displayed on the wall in her little trailer house where she lived. So she was quite proud of them. At that graduation, there was a telegram from the President of the United States congratulating her. That was Ronald Reagan, congratulating her on her honorary doctorate. Also, the governor of the state of Louisiana at that time, Edwin Edwards, had made her an honorary colonel of Louisiana. So we teased her a lot. We said, you know, we don't know whether to call you Colonel Dr. Hunter or Dr. Colonel Hunter. And she thought that was funny, and she enjoyed that as much as we did, even though I think she really did not understand, you know, the whole process in depth.
Great, fabulous. Well, that leads me. Describe Clementine's sense of humor and wit. I think maybe a better word.
Before I do that, are you going to talk, or do you want that in there then? Are we ready? Clementine's sense of humor was just wonderful. It was extraordinary. I think one needs only to look at her painting, her version of the big chicken pulling the cotton cart to see how whimsical she was. But Clementine was fun. She was fun to know. She and Francois Mignon particularly had a wonderful relationship that had a lot of humor in it. When St. Augustine Church decided to build a mausoleum and to have spaces available to people, Clementine and Francois decided together that they would buy a drawer for each of for each, and that these two drawers would be side by side, and that is the way they're buried today. But at the time, Clementine took a glass fishbowl and put it on her front porch, and it was not far from the sign that said 25 cents to look, which in itself is I think, tells you a little bit about her sense of humor. But the fishbowl was there, so that if anybody wanted to donate a quarter or 50 cents or whatever, or $5,000 maybe, to her to help her pay for her drawer in the mausoleum. But Francois Mignon said to me one day, he said, "Why don't you buy a drawer down there?" And he said, "You know, we could, it would be wonderful. You could be on one side of Clementine and I could be on the other side of Clementine, and then we could pass stories back and forth through all eternity. And wouldn't they be just wonderful, because they would be retold by Clementine on each occasion," and he and I enjoyed that little joke together. But she told him when they bought their drawers in the mausoleum that if she got there before he did, that she would have coffee ready for him, and that if he got there before she did, that he would just have to wait until she got there to get his coffee. And I think this just says a lot about how advanced and how complex really her sense of humor was. It was sort of out of time and space for where she was, and a total lack of education on her part. It was innate. She was wonderful company. I spent some winter afternoons with her one year making some audio tapes, just the two of us. It was a time that I found was a quiet time for her. There were not a lot of children and people in and out of the house. And we had a wonderful time. I just, I didn't know anybody that I enjoyed being with any more than I did Clementine.
Okay.
There are two angel paintings in the thing. You want me to just start?
Yeah, just go ahead.
Are we going over there?
Now we are, yep.
Okay. One of the paintings, one of Clementine's paintings that is famous is her angels. People always notice her angels because the composition is full of angels flying up, down, left, right. And most of the angels are always dressed in white, but there are always some angels in there dressed in red. And people who come in my house and look at that painting always say immediately, "What are the red angel? I mean, what are the angels dressed in red? What does that mean?" And I always have to say that I'm not really sure, because I've heard her say different things. I've heard her say they were devils. I've heard her say they were angels who were just tired of wearing white and decided to wear red. But I think the thing that she said to me once that was most meaningful is that the red angels were really devils, or were devils, but that they were flying around to save their souls. And then she elaborated on that and said that there were good people in the world and there were bad people in the world, and that she felt like there were people sort of in between those two who were not bad enough to go to hell and not good enough to go to heaven, and that they were, flying around trying to gain their souls. And I think this can be traced to the Catholic Church. Clementine had ties both to the Baptist Church and to the Catholic Church, and I think that can be tied into the teachings of the Catholic Church.
Okay. And her abstracts, where did the abstracts come from?
When I first started buying paintings from Clementine, about the second or third one I bought from her, was an abstract. And I remember the day so well when I went down to her house and she showed me what she had for sale, and there was this abstract, this painting. And I looked at it and immediately thought that she had not done it and questioned her about it. And she told me, she said, well, I've been painting those for a few years, but I'll tell you one thing, I'm not going to paint anymore. This is the last one, I'm through, and I'm not painting anymore because they make my head sweat. Well, I was convinced that she had painted it, and I immediately bought it because I thought that, you know, it was so different from anything else that she had done. I later obtained several more abstracts that she did. There are a limited number of those. She painted those during 1962 and 1963, and they were done as a result of James Register working with her. James Register was one of the writers, the creative people who came to Melrose to work now and then. And he decided that since Clementine was totally untaught, no one had ever made even a suggestion to her as to how one painted, that he would see if he could stimulate her to do something besides just plantation scenes and religious scenes. And so he wrote about this, and there was nothing hidden about this process. He said that he would take advertisements out of glossy magazines, colored advertisements, and would make sort of a montage and take it down to her and just leave it with her as sort of a stimulus to cause her to maybe do something of a like manner. And it did. And she did a number of abstracts, and they're considered by some people who look at her work as her finest work. There are other people who do not like them at all, but they certainly are interesting. And but she was obviously doing them because James Register wanted her to do them more than because she wanted to do them, because she stopped. She did a few after the one that I bought, but it's not anything that she really enjoyed doing.
Well, I've forgotten now what I was going to say, because you said something there that made me think about. Do you think that she watched like Alberta Kinsey paint? Do you think she had a sense of how, or was it just something that was innate, like her zinnias? You look at how she applied the paint for the petals of the zinnias. I mean, she obviously knew how to paint flowers, and that is not easy. Do you think she observed, or that, again, it was just something innate in her?
Clementine was untaught. She did not have any. Do we need to tell
No,
them to be quiet? That's not.
No, we will.
Because I told him before he ever got over here that they wouldn't have to be quiet, and he's still making noise.
They always do.
Clementine was untaught. To my knowledge, she never had a lesson, and I feel certain that she never did. I think even in observing Alberta Kinsey and maybe other painters who were visitors at Melrose, I don't know, but I would doubt that she ever really studied and observed closely those people painting. Clementine was a very intelligent person. She was uneducated. She wouldn't stay in school. She always told about how she ran away from school. Every time my mother would take her to school, she would run away. And she could not read nor write. But I was always amazed at how much intelligence Clementine Hunter had. And I think it's possible that her gift of observation, or her observational powers, was such that she could see a lot in a very short period of time, and a very small exposure to these people who were painting. Because I know life on a plantation well enough to know that she was supposed to be in the kitchen cooking and you know, tending to the children. She was not supposed to be standing behind someone who was painting and or sitting there and watching them paint. So I think, you know, I think it's very possible that she observed the way people were doing things, but I don't think anybody ever pointed out to her that this is the way you do this or that. I think those things just, I think they were part of that gift. I just think that she knew how to do that. It was just the way she was. And it was so natural to her. You know, Clementine had periods of painting, and some of my friends and I used to laugh in the early days of collecting Clementine's work about her pink period. You know, we likened it to Picasso's blue period. But there was a period of time in which all of Clementine's skies were this bright pink. And they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. And I don't think that was anything that she consciously planned. It's just that that's what she wanted to do at that particular time, and that was what she did. You know, it's been suggested that the chicken pulling, the cotton cart, that we've always just thought was whimsical and humorous and an example of her sense of humor, but we have had art historians tell us that there have been works of art through all recorded history of birds pulling chariots and this kind of thing, and that it just seems to be something that all artists know. Just, you know, it's just an innate kind of thing. That staggers my imagination, because having known Clementine Hunter and who she was and what she was and when she was what she was, it amazes me that she would share with, you know, all of history in the art world these, you know, how can it be anything but a gift?
Oh, that's fabulous. What do you personally love about Clementine's paintings?
When I think about that, I love everything about it. I have loved Clementine Hunter's work since I bought the first painting for $3, which was the Black Jesus on the cross at Calvary. Her work is happy. It's colorful. I live in the house that I live in because of Clementine Hunter's work. I bought a historic house that has very high ceilings and large rooms, and I bought it so that I could display my collection and let other people enjoy it along with me. It's happy. It's happy to live with. It makes me a nicer person. It makes me a better person, because you can't live with all of this joyousness that we find in her artwork, or the colorfulness of it. Many people early on, the things that were written about Clementine's work, most often was pointed out that they were colorful. That was the first thing that people said about her work. And it's obvious, I think, because she painted with paints right out of the tube. She didn't mix paints. She painted with red, she painted with white, she painted with green, she painted with blue, right out of the tube. And so they are colorful and happy. And I think I enjoy that more than anything else. If I had to say that, you know, one thing, certainly the fact that they historically record the South that has passed from the scene is important to me. I remember some of that pre-World War II life, and her recordings jog my memory. And they're just, they're just happy, and I enjoy living with them.
Okay.
That sort of petered out, but that's all right.
Oh, well, but
Cut that out.
you gave me some
Cut that
great,
out.
you gave me a couple of great sound bites there. What endeared her to you?
I grew to be very fond of Clementine Hunter through the years. I think the first personality characteristic of Clementine's that I became conscious of was this haughtiness, or sort of a regal kind of bearing. I found that so unusual in a person living where she was living at the time that she was living. And then as she gradually took me into her life and became such an important part of my life, I began to see other facets of her personality. And I really never saw anything that I didn't like. Clementine Hunter was an extremely generous person. She would have given those paintings away if she had not had to buy the butane gas to heat the house and to pay the electricity bill. But beyond paying for those things, she gave all of her money away. Her children and her grandchildren was extremely generous. Her love for children and animals was so obvious, and of course I identified with that. Through the years, I took children with me down to see her, friends who were visiting who had children, and I would say 6 or 8 times those children left with a painting from Clementine. There was a gift. She just, she really loved children. She was so generous. She just didn't have any greed in her personality at all. She, I think too that she returned my affection for her. She really loved Tommy Whitehead. And she frequently said that Tommy was her white son. And a time or two she referred to me at the same time in talking about Tommy. She would say I was like her white sister, and I would tease her a lot about that because I pride myself on not being as old as Clementine Hunter was. But I was just really glad to be, included in the family. But she just was a wonderful person in so many ways. I never saw anything but love from Clementine. Maybe when she was younger she was capable of other characteristics, but by the time I met her she was just delightful.
That's great.
Okay.
That's it.
Got it? Good.
Well, let's shoot 2 paintings. Are you shooting that?
Just because it's there.
Well, you go right ahead. It's wonderful. He's taken a liking to this little bright room there.
A little wedding.
Okay, I want to shoot this one, and then Frenchie going to heaven.
Mm-hmm.